I'm not gonna lie, I'm really burpy.
Hello and welcome to another episode of SyrupCast. It is Thursday, February 11th? 12th?
12th.
Thank you, Jane.
February
As
whatever.
Always, it's February whatever because every day in February is exactly the same.
Not Friday the 13th.
Oh, that's
Or
right.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Although Friday the 13th and February 14th are right next to each other, so that doesn't bode well for anybody in love. As always, I'm joined by Douglas Soltis. How are you, sir?
There is no love in my life, only
Except-
ginger beer.
Except for that delicious homebrew. And Jay McIntaggart, how are you?
Yay!
It is.
How are you?
Just yay! Muppets!
That's the best Muppet. The Muppet that says nothing but just shakes.
I'm pretty good. Right before the podcast, I ate an entire box of Junior Mints, which I haven't had in a long time.
Wow,
And I
super
love
jealous.
Junior Mints.
I
They're like
love
my
the-
weakness.
I love this, like the big king size
Oh.
on there.
Well, Daniel, it is indeed a king-size box. Oh, sorry. Today's podcast guest arrived early.
Uh-oh. We're going to have some purring.
Well, I'll try and keep her unhappy for you guys.
So this week is, it's been a busy week, but it's also sort of a slow time in mobile. There's been a ton of regulatory stuff, but Doug and I have basically beaten that to a pulp. Last week, the week before, it was just Doug and I, and we talked all about regulatory. And then last week we had Ben Class talk about. Sorry, what am I saying? 2 weeks ago, Jane was here too, and we did
I'm
talk
glad
about
it meant
regulatory.
so much to you, Daniel.
I'm a terrible, terrible person. Last week it was just Doug and I, and we had a guest on, Ben Class. If you haven't listened to that podcast, or if you did try to listen to it and you had some audio problems, try again. We cleaned it up, and if you couldn't get through it the first time, it's worth checking out once again because the conversation was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was really, really
Send a
good.
petition to Ben Class, B-E-N, and get him to buy a mic for podcasting.
Yeah, please put yourself on Kickstarter or something just to buy yourself one of those damn mics. This week, though, we're going to deviate a little bit from that. We're going to talk hardware. This is an MWC hardware preview episode. So tons of stuff happening in the hardware space. We know a lot about the upcoming devices from HTC, Samsung, Motorola, Huawei. Everybody else is going to be churning out those phones. Today we also got a preview of Windows 10 for smartphones. I loaded it up on my Lumia 820. Is it worth it? We'll check it out. But first, guys, what are you using right now? Let's talk a little bit about the last 6 months of your hardware, because I want to know what you guys are using so that we can know what you're excited for. Jane?
I just looked at it and I was really sad. I'm using the Nexus 6, which I want to love, but just I feel like it's like that like I was gonna say boyfriend, but you guys wouldn't know that. It's like that significant other where you're just like I don't want to break up with them because they're a good person, but it's just not working out.
Actually, I know exactly how that's gone, and I resent your analogy.
No. I was gonna say it's like when you break up with a guy, but I don't think you've ever broken up with a guy before. So anyway.
I've broken up with a guy friend, if that counts.
Yeah.
But we won't get
Okay.
into that.
Anyway,
That's for our other podcast.
the feelings
Syrupcast at
podcast.
I experimented with other platforms in college.
But yeah, so the Nexus 6.
You wrote a story about that, how you were liking it after
Did
2
a
months.
tortured article about how, God, if only my free phone made me happier. But yeah, no, it's too big.
But you got some really interesting responses from that, and I'm actually eager to talk about that because it seems to be the most divisive phone Google's ever made, and the Nexus 5 is one of those phones now that people look back longingly going, why didn't they just upgrade that version? Why didn't they just give us a smaller, or a Nexus, a Moto X basically, in Nexus form without realizing that the Moto X is basically a Nexus 6.
Just go buy the Moto X, people.
And now that Android 5 Lollipop is rolled out for the Moto X, it's even more like a Nexus phone. So, what were some of the responses that you got? Like, what surprised you about the?
I got a lot of responses calling me super whiny and spoiled.
Okay.
Because I think it's interesting because people, I don't know if people want to hear 2 months later that someone's not really liking their purchase. I don't know. It's weird because the reason we started doing this series is because we figured that you don't really spend enough time with the phone that you're reviewing before you have to get the review finished and out the door. And there's things you figure out in your first 2, 3, 6 months of owning that phone where you're like, oh yeah, it's a really great device, but I kind of don't like that it does this.
Relationships change and evolve over time.
Yeah, but people don't want to hear about that in the same way you don't want to watch friggin' Revolutionary Road. You want to watch like When Harry Met Sally. Like you don't want to hear about how someone's working on liking their phone. Like it's boring. So people were saying, oh, if you don't like it, why did you buy it? And like you shouldn't be complaining. But some people decided that it was because I was a woman and small. And they said that I'm 6'3" and 220 pounds, and this Nexus 6 is the perfect size. It's a perfect phone. I hope they keep making 6-inch phones.
Well, that's what's so interesting to me about Google's strategy here, because instead of doing what Apple did and releasing 2 Nexus phones in 2 sizes, they released a carrier version of the Nexus through the Moto X, and then a one-size Nexus that was extremely alienating to what people consider to be a Nexus user base, right? Because instead of it being $350 and super sort of middle of the road in many ways, this is a premium device in every sense, and as a result, you pay for it.
But it's weird because I agree, but then the size like totally throws me off. Like I don't understand why it is. I think that was my lack of silent mode disturbing the podcast. Sorry. Yeah, no, I think it's weird that I touched on it a little bit, was that I don't understand why it's 6 inches. I don't understand why, for a company like Google, who really only makes one phone a year, why they would go for such a huge size. Like, I don't understand what was wrong with the size. They could have deviated from their normal $350, like, let's balance price and performance. They could have deviated from that and made, like, a really high-end phone, but it didn't have to be so big. It's such a polarizing decision, I think.
Well, A, because the Motorola X does exist. B, because when it comes to Android as a platform, and has been demonstrated on iOS, phablet is king, right? So releasing like a super huge phone,
yeah, but there's only like 1 or 2 other 6-inch phones.
Yeah, phablet's not king yet.
And phablet isn't 6 inches. Like, it doesn't have to be 6 inches to be considered a phablet.
I'm not saying they didn't maybe necessarily overshoot, but they were probably anticipating like a convergence point, and maybe it's too far. But I also think we've talked about this before, where the pricing is also a matter of, it's not that it's too much, it's just the expectation of what people want to pay for a Nexus phone, and whether or not that price is aggressively being subsidized versus its actual cost.
Well, I mean, all the Nexus phones cost exactly the same as the Note 4, basically any other high-end smartphone on the market. So you're getting what you would expect from a Galaxy Note 4 or an iPhone 6. You're just getting it with a different brand, and that brand has to be, I mean, it's an evolving brand. Nexus now encompasses not just phones, it's also tablets, it's set-top boxes. Eventually it'll probably, they'll probably release something for the car. These are things that don't stay static, and Google has a strategy. And if you recall, back in 2014, we heard about this Android Silver program, and I think what people don't realize is that the Nexus 6 was probably meant as the first version or first smartphone in that series, where they would sell it through carriers, not with a Nexus brand, but they would sell it through, in a special, with special marketing materials that were designed by Google in a very Apple-like way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because even though the program kind of got shuttered with the ouster of the guy leading it, I can't remember his name, but we wrote about it. You still have the phone. Like, you can't. The phone development doesn't slow down, right? So unless you completely shutter that. You know.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things Jane wrote about was how the device was supposed to have a fingerprint sensor on the back where the dimple is, and because Apple bought the only company making really good versions of touch-based fingerprint sensors, they just decided to remove the feature altogether. Jane, would that have been like a premium feature that would have caused you to pay more?
No, and I didn't. I don't think I've written about that topic a couple of times, but I don't think I even bothered to include it in the piece that I wrote because I don't care. Like I don't think that even if it did have a sensor, I think it would be the feature that I would say, oh, it's nice that that's there, but I don't ever use it. Its sole purpose would be to get little pieces of crud from my pocket stuck around the edges. Like I don't think it would ever use it.
You don't like your crud dimple?
Like, what?
You don't like
my
your
crud dimple? No, but I'm serious. Like, do you guys use your Touch ID? But
I use it all the time, and I think it's fantastic.
But we also don't curse like the gods every time we use it, right? Because of the implementation.
Right. So, even if it was implemented really, really well, I would be skeptical about whether I would use it for anything other than unlocking my phone. I mean, you guys just got their third-party app integration for Touch ID, but I mean, I guess it's because we don't really know. Like Samsung and a couple of other companies have done it, but Android itself doesn't have native fingerprint recognition integration with the OS. So it would have to be like a third party. I don't know. I have no idea how to imagine how it would even work, which is why.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more of. That the core Android experience is sort of it's reached a plateau, and now companies like Samsung and HTC are just building on top of that. It's been like that for a long time, but with Lollipop, they're not really messing with the core feature set anymore. And
but they had it. It was in there because until like such a late stage, the phone itself had a fingerprint sensor. It was in Lollipop, and they just disabled it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they've disabled it until a time where it's appropriate. But at the same time, that means there won't be a Nexus phone until at least next October that has fingerprint sensor.
Yeah. Okay, but. So taking it back to the hardware then, would you be, when you're looking to buy a phone, are you looking to buy a phone that maybe includes a feature that won't really be relevant until like the second year of use for that phone? Or do you only want that when...
Well, that's what I'm saying. And if it was there, I wouldn't begrudge its presence because, I foresee it becoming more useful in a year, 18 months when mobile payments are more prevalent and stuff like that. But it didn't factor into the piece that I wrote because currently it has no impact on my life. And definitely if I was buying a phone, if I was the kind of person who only bought a phone once every 2-3 years, then that would be, like future-proofing my purchase would be a huge concern, but it's not.
Yeah, and that replacement cycle, I think even though people generally replace their phones every 18 months to 24 months, I think knowing that your phone's going to improve over the course of its life is an incentive to buy a higher end device like the Nexus. So you know that at least for 24 months Google is going to support it with new software. If that hardware is really good from the beginning, and because hardware has reached a point where you can buy a decent phone for $100 and you don't have to worry that it's going to perform badly, when you're buying an $800 phone, you want it to at least have 24 to 36 months of good software updates in it to make it, to make the hardware worth buying.
Yeah, but so I'm experiencing this right now, right? So we're like, I'm going through this weird life experiment where I've decided to ride the iPhone 5 until it literally falls apart on me. This week was an interesting thing where both the home and the lock screen button decided to no longer exist or work. So I just basically had a phone whose screen I could rotate. And generally with iOS, this is most recent updates, it's been pretty frustrating to see how the performance drops with each additional feature set. So, and I don't know if the iPhone 5 will even be a supported device when iOS 9 drops, which is supposedly looking to improve just overall performance rather than feature set. But it's that kind of thing where you're like, the hardware might be like valuable and good for 24 months, but if the software updates aren't really looking to eke out performance on the lower end, you're still having to update anyways.
Yeah, so Apple will support the iPhone 5 with iOS 9. They have to, because that's running an A6 processor, and they're still selling the iPad Mini, the first gen, which runs an A5, and that's going to be updated to iOS 9. It has to be, because they're still selling it as one of their products. It's still running in it's still running in the iPad 2, and I believe so the iPhone 5 runs a faster version of that processor, the A6, so it definitely will get iOS 9. If you look at the iPhone 4, for example, that still runs iOS 8, and it runs it badly, but it still runs it well enough to use for most people. So, one thing that's interesting about iOS 9, though, that we saw a bunch of stuff leaked this week from 9to5Mac, it seems like because they're focusing on bug fixes and stability, they're getting out ahead of the reputation of iOS 8.1 as being super unreliable and unstable, which it is. There have been so many bugs with this release that it's, I think it's been a great release in terms of features, but for example, I can't use a third-party keyboard because it's just so bad. It never works. So
not even that IKEA emoji keyboard.
Oh, I love that thing.
Yeah, it is something that they're just having to double down again on quality control, and it's not something you're used to with Apple, or at least not to the extent that maybe some other manufacturers have. So I really think it's smart for them. Also, with iOS 8 and iOS 7 kind of laying two different groundworks, one from an aesthetic standpoint, one with like extensibility and like interoperable features. They really just need to kind of hone that and refine it rather than add some new hot feature. Like, they just need these features to run better, faster, quicker, more easily, be more deeply integrated than anything, I think.
I'm like, sorry. I've just drowned in a sea of negative comments on the internet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, someone take me back. Pull me back in, guys.
What are you reading that's so negative?
I'm reading the comments, some of the comments on my Nexus 6 post. Someone told me that I'm a hack because he stopped reading when I complained about the Nexus 5 camera quality, because it is 100% user issue, because the Nexus 5 camera is better than most 16 megapixel cameras on the market.
Oh, really?
Yep. I'm so angry. Anyway, sorry guys. Continue.
Take a deep breath.
Close the tab.
They're not real people. They're just trolls.
Yeah.
They're not actually there to do good in the world.
Also, I love anonymously writing ridiculous things just to see how people respond. Also, so.
So Douglas is admitting it.
It was you.
It's just me, guys. Sorry, yeah. And also, I feel like at this point in time, I should mention that this is non-alcoholic ginger beer. I'm not just crushing a full liter of anything.
Not a liter.
I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
Well, I am crushing nearly a full liter of actual beer.
I have a cup of tea the size of my face.
Nice glass.
With a rabbit.
For the people not watching the video pod but listening, this is Innocent Gun. It's my favorite Scottish beer. It's quite good.
For the people listening and not watching, they're also missing our amazing new, nameplates that we have on our feed.
Our little banners, yeah.
Yeah.
Banners.
So let's
derail the conversation there. Yeah. Anyway.
Let's do a preview, because this is something I'm going to Barcelona for the first time. I'm really excited and kind of nervous, but the two main devices that we're expecting to see there are the Galaxy S6 and the accompanying Edge, Galaxy S6 Edge, and the HTC One M9. I don't think it'll be called the M9, but everybody is, so we'll just do that for procedural sake. And then there's going to be a ton of other devices that they're not really worth speculating on yet. But let's talk Galaxy S6, because this is the 2014 was certainly not a banner year for Samsung. They sold millions of devices, but their profit dropped, their market share dropped. The prospect of them dominating the Android market in both the high and low end dropped so much that it wasn't even one could equate it to the rise of Samsung back in 2010. I mean, it's the same sort of momentum, just in the opposite direction. But what's so interesting is that it's not that Samsung's creating bad products, because they're not. It's that other companies are creating really great products at half the price. So what does Samsung need to pull out of its hat to make the Galaxy S6 a success? And what can they do when the high-end Android market is already so saturated?
Well, they definitely don't need to give it those bloody curved edges. That seems to be the thing. They're doing two, right? I don't know. I just find that they... It makes me so angry. It's so frustrating. Because they seem to, like you say, other companies are making great products and Samsung is making, I don't know, it's like a shotgun approach, for one, which is not good for them because it means they can't concentrate enough. But two, they just seem to phone it in. So, I don't know, I want the Galaxy Alpha, but bigger.
That's what the S6 is going to be.
Yeah, but is it going to be weird? Is it going to be all SE? Like, I actually just want the Alpha again. I want the Galaxy Beta. Yeah, like, and I think, and we've talked about this before, where like the Note line really works in a way that the S line doesn't seem to anymore, because everything that it's built in such a way that it's all about this idea of like super big phone with like some crazy additional productivity features. Like, it's got an interesting design, and I don't really know what the Galaxy S is about anymore. It was even when it was like an iPhone clone, at least that was an identity in Contra. But I don't really know what should a flagship Galaxy S phone be at this stage.
So I think it's important to point out a few trends over the past 3 years. The Galaxy S3 certainly meant to differentiate itself from the iPhone, meant to differentiate Samsung as a designer of good phones. With, I wouldn't say that the Galaxy S3 was a nicely designed phone, but it was certainly it stood out more than the S2. Yeah, and it looks okay, right? It looked pretty good for for what it was. But what I think is important is that with the Galaxy S4, they thought, okay, we have this design ethic that we're going to build on, and we're going to throw in every feature known to man, right? The Galaxy S4 was the year of the feature. The Galaxy S5 was the year of sort of them clawing back all of those, all of that excess, adding water protection, making the phone itself a little bit more robust. And I think this year is going to be all about restraint. It's going in the opposite direction. Right, it's all about metal. It's all about premium. It's all about making sure that your phone isn't overrun with bloatware, because that's what has defined Samsung software for so long. And I think it's important for them to create a good phone first, a phone that feels great in the hand, a phone like the Note 4 or the Galaxy Alpha that people look at and go, okay, I see why Samsung is the top-selling Android manufacturer in the world.
Well, so not only that, but to follow up, it would be, I see why I would want that phone as opposed to this other Samsung phone. Like, I know what each of these phones is for, either in functionality, use case, or like target demographic. I need to know why I would choose it over the Note.
Yeah, and I feel like the Note is one of those phones you pick it up and you go, ooh, it's pretty. And like even when you're when you're in the store and you're like, which device is right for me, and a lot of the time you can pick up a device and say, oh, this is really nice, and then you can decide, well, it's a bit too big, or it's not really right for me. But the Galaxy S5 is one of those devices where you can try and have someone sell you on like the utility of that device, but you're probably just going to pick it up and go, he's like going to put a case on it.
Yeah, because it also looks like every other phone, right? The Note, I think the Note and the Alpha, I think we gravitate to them more because it looks like a phone that only Samsung could make. Like, it looks like a Samsung phone, whereas the Galaxy S series is like generic platonic ideal of Android phone. And I want to see them do more like, this is what we're about. This is Samsung making a phone, in the way that Motorola does that now. I think that's the coolest thing in the world. I want to see something that's like specific with intention and not just,
This is what a phone is supposed to look like.
Yeah. This is what a Galaxy S phone is supposed to look like and do and be, because this is what it's for.
I think it's important to realize that Samsung has, come up against a number of other manufacturers who are doing really interesting things in terms of design as well. So, LG just released announced the G Flex 2, and it's really beautiful. Jane and I, gawked over it for a very long time at CES. Sony released, in spite of their massive write-down, they still sold 20 million smartphones last quarter. They're still making some money. I mean, if you leave aside the $1.5 billion write-down, and Douglas is going to argue with me, that is part of it, obviously, but if you remove that part, they're still making a little bit of money.
You remove all the bad news. Yeah.
What I mean, okay, it's an accounting trick, I get it, but they are selling more smartphones. LG still selling a good number of smartphones, and they are primed to do more this year.
Do you think they'll have another phone at MWC?
Who?
LG.
No.
After the Flex?
No. No way. LG just launched the G3 in August. There's no way that they'll come out with a G4. So,
yeah.
I think that the G3 is still a great phone. It's still got a lot to live for.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
man,
I just got the Lollipop update. I'm gonna do a preview of that for probably Monday.
We're so deep in phones that we're talking about the LG. Like, it's okay, LG. You can
don't kill yourself.
You got a good 20 months left, man. You just get back in shape, start eating right, find someone who loves you. So we kicked off this conversation with two companies or two phones, and I think the reason why that they stick together is because, and this is a conversation we were having in the office yesterday, who's gonna make the first Android phone that's like undisputedly the best Android phone that everyone wants? And like the two potential ones are probably coming from Samsung or HTC. And last year's versions each had their flaws that we're hoping to correct. The One M8 was a phone that we all really, really liked to the extent that we could. Can HTC step up? Like, I know that if Samsung gets out of its own way, it can totally deliver like a AAA amazing phone that sells bajillions if they get out of their own way. Can HTC do that?
No, I mean, it's important to realize that a failure for Samsung is still by far sells 20 million more than the next Android manufacturer.
Okay, but that's also a marketing thing. Like, beyond just like the sales, I just mean in terms of like phone. Like,
but you and I talk about the HTC and Samsung on the same level, but most people don't even know what an HTC is.
Yes,
they don't
totally true.
Like they walk into a store and they only know Apple and Samsung represents Android, and there are no other choices. They don't even know
Samsung. They just say Galaxy.
Yeah, and Samsung's good with that, and they don't care if they sell you an A5 or an S5. They just want to sell you a Samsung phone. Mm-hmm. So that's how they're cannibalizing their own market. It's basically like Apple selling an iPod Touch as a smartphone and saying, we don't care. Or I guess it's the opposite when they started eating into their own iPod Touch market share with the iPhone, on a 2-year contract. They were making way more money from each device, but they didn't care where their money was coming from. It was just staying in the company. Yeah. Samsung's got the opposite problem, that they're not selling as many high-end phones, so they're going to have to make up for it in the mid and low range. And that's a problem because Chinese manufacturers like Xiaomi and ZTE and Huawei and all the others are eating them.
Hey, I heard that Xiaomi isn't a phone company; it's an internet company.
Oh God! Oh, that's so weird. I heard that about another company too.
I heard that about Yahoo in 2009.
I heard about that about Yahoo in 1999.
We're not a search engine; we're an internet engine.
Oh Lord.
Of things. No, okay, but the HTC, beyond all the business stuff, because we got hot phone takes coming out of our ears. So, and I also think that we feel a responsibility to, if we find amazing phoneness, to relate that to the masses so that everyone goes home happy, even if Jane is a hack. So, like, do we think that this next HTC phone, the One M9-ish, not going to be called that, can be it? Will it be the phone that eliminates all bias?
Yeah, I mean, if they figure out the camera, and I mean really figure out the camera, because
as in just have one.
Well, even if they have two, but if they figure out the camera and it no longer takes terrible photos, I mean, here we're talking about, these companies making, they're putting out 20 megapixel cameras with phones with 20 megapixel cameras, right? And if you know anything about the physical limitations of a smartphone camera sensor, you know that the camera sensor itself isn't going to be demonstrably bigger than that of the iPhone or an older Galaxy or the HTC One's Ultra Pixel, right? It's the size of the individual pixels. So when HTC increases the size of the camera from 4 megapixels to 20, they have to cram 5 times the number of pixels into a sensor that may only be 30% larger than the previous device. So you're looking at higher detail, higher resolution, but also lower poorer low light capabilities that have to be made up for with optical image stabilization. A lot of software tweaks like sharpening. You have all these things that could potentially go wrong, not because they went back to 8 megapixels, but because they jumped 5 times the resolution to 20 megapixels. So, HTC may be shooting themselves in the foot here again, but who knows?
Is that the only thing they need to change?
Honestly, I'm a big fan of the HTC One. I think that it still has my vote as probably the best all-round Android phone of 2014.
Me too.
Even with the camera.
I just liked it for a phone of that size, how well it fit in my hand.
It was amazing.
Like in an aspect ratio that didn't make me feel like I was just holding just like a screen brick.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that leads us to Motorola, because I think that was the other device. The Moto X was the other device that I really loved in 2014, and I think you guys all agreed it had some really great aspects to it. And what we're hearing is that the Moto E is going to be announced next week, the second gen, with a $99 price point on prepaid. And I mean, when you have a device like that runs Lollipop, it's got a decent processor, a decent screen, a gig of RAM, enough storage to get by on. What happens when you're like, okay, well, here, brother, like I'll just buy you a $100 smartphone or use it as a second smartphone because you want one on for a backup. Like, what happens to the value of high-end Android as a result?
I haven't used the Moto E a whole lot. What's the camera like? I feel like camera is going to be really important to people. I don't know how.
No, I don't think the camera is going to be important to people. I think they realize what they're getting. It's a decent. I mean, it's not a great camera. It's a piece of crap.
That's what I mean.
It can successfully take a photo.
But it will take a photo. It has
that's what'll stop it from being the phone that you
for
teenagers
$100? Really?
No, not at all.
No, but that's like if it takes sucky photos, like
as long as they can kick those sucky photos to each other back and forth, then they're fine with it. Like it's like
they are.
It's like baseline communication tool at that point.
Right. I don't think, as long as it runs Snapchat, I don't think they're going to worry that there's not a lot of detail in their 5 megapixel photo.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, for the most part, I just want a camera that takes good shots most of the time. But I also know that when I use
Nexus 5.
Yeah, it's perfect.
We're getting to the point now where high-end only refers to build quality and not performance. because the performance difference between any of these devices is so, like like we've talked a lot about like benchmarking and things, and like how useless that is, and like
Speak for yourself.
well, when it comes to phones, and like especially when they're all running the same OS that can't necessarily take advantage of increases in memory or processor or the amount of number fudging that's been going on. Like, if you put a list of, or like a lineup of all Android phones together from 1 year, from the high end to the low end, is not that much of a difference, right? So, what are you paying for? It's like the Nexus thing. It's like what value are you expecting to extract at that price point? And for $100, if you're like, hey, this phone like is totally solid, works really well, and like is durable, gets me through my day, $100, that's great. And then it sets
Storage,
this.
though. What are they going to do? Like storage, those low-end phones always have like next to no storage.
Yeah, because no one buys a $100 phone and is like, I need to back up all my files and stuff. They're like, hey,
buying a $100 phone aren't saying, oh, I should every couple months I should take off all my photos and put them on my computer so that they're not like taking up all my space. Like we've talked before about how 16 gigs just mostly isn't enough for anybody anymore because of the way we use our phones. It's
an education thing too. So,
yeah.
Lollipop fixed most of the issues with external storage. Apps can now store to their own folder, but other apps can now store to other folders when given the permission. Google really messed up external storage on KitKat. Oh,
intentionally, right?
Hang on 1 second. Continue amongst yourselves.
Intentionally, did you say?
Yeah, well, they made it really difficult to like store to SD and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, but did you say intentionally? Do you think they did it on purpose?
Yeah, because they started like restricting access and things like that and making it slower as a security thing. Like they started building in, like they started to try to work out like external memory in Android, and I think there's been a bit of a swing back. I know. I'm kind of presuming what Daniel's big rant was going to be, or his little education session. But Daniel's gone. Let's talk about us. Let's talk about
us.
Yeah. How are we feeling? What are we thinking? We're not going to Barcelona.
No.
Mayor's going for the first time. So maybe for the people who have never gone to a Mobile World Congress and want to know more about what it's like, we can share our experiences, because I've always had a lovely time.
Yeah. Day 1, press conferences. Day 2, show floor. Day 4 through 8, like cured meats and Spain.
Oh yeah.
And Spain.
All over the place. Yeah.
What did I miss?
We talked about ourselves for a while.
Oh, cool.
No, we were just we guessed at what we thought you were going to educate us about, and then we decided to just talk about, because none of our listeners ever get to go to these conferences, right? And I think a lot of them might have a conception of what CES is as like just a North American trade show that happens to be about tech. Everyone's probably been to at least one trade show, but Mobile World Congress is very different, not only because of where it intersects globally and the convergence of tons of international companies there, but then just because it's in Barcelona, the style and the aesthetic and the experience of like actually being there as a journalist versus Vegas or Florida or other places.
Yeah, I'm pretty nervous, to be honest. I've never been to Barcelona. I know no Spanish.
You don't need
it. Nothing about the city.
Week. Not that week.
I've heard it's terrible for pickpocketing, so I'm basically just going to glue all of my stuff on me and hope for the best. But
you'll have a great time.
And the more facial hair you have, the more you'll look like a Spaniard. So like start on that now.
Oh no, I don't look good with facial hair. I'll sacrifice that.
What else happened?
Well, okay, so we're done talking about the Moto E, but I just want to come back to the point about how Motorola has a really good thing going, and they sold 10 million smartphones last quarter. It was the first quarter under Lenovo, and Google never reported smartphone sales when they own Motorola, but Lenovo does, and it was really interesting because most of them are probably Moto Gs, and some of them were Moto Es, and a very small number were probably Moto Xs. But that doesn't mean that the Moto X was a failure. It just meant that the Moto G was a super popular phone. But I do think that it's important that they keep iterating on these products, because the second gen Moto E Moto G was a very incremental upgrade over the first. The Moto X more so than the first, but the Moto E looks to be that kind of hitting that price point, that $100 price point that a lot of people really focus on when it comes to electronics. So I look forward to trying it and seeing what it can do. The other thing that came out today was the Windows 10 for phones. It's a technical preview. It does not look or feel much like the end product from what we've been told, but it's going to be a very interesting new direction for Microsoft, because they are putting a lot of their universal app strategy into Windows 10. What do you guys think? I mean, is this going to do anything for the Microsoft, especially after the announcement of them buying Sunrise and Acompli? They're really focusing on mobile as a platform now and a cross-platform strategy rather than just Windows. What do you guys think?
I am excited. Since the start, I think since like the Windows Phone 7 days, I've always thought that it looked like it was a really good looking OS and it had so much potential. But I can't believe we're still waiting for it to get there. I don't know. I just want them to get it right. And I think like if it's like a whole platform approach, they're doing well, and they're spending a lot of money trying to get it to where it needs to be so that they actually can. One of the things that struck me when I was watching that event in January, the Windows 10 preview event, was how it almost seems like if they can make Windows Phone as much like Windows 10 on the desktop, they can almost funnel desktop users onto their mobile devices by being like, hey, this phone does exactly all that stuff that you need to do. But,
yeah, that's a great idea. I don't know. So in my conversations with Microsoft employees, I feel that even they are unsure the extent to which they are committed to being a player in mobile versus being a player on mobile. They're obviously looking to be a player on mobile, but the extent to which that includes them being a hardware company, beyond like Surface, which I think they're pretty excited with how quickly they were able to ramp that up and get that to a point where with the Pro 3, I think it's where the vision that they had of it is like kind of there, and with Microsoft Band being an experiment that they'll iterate on. In terms of like pure mobile, I'm not sure where they're at with that. They're kind of returning to their roots and just being a software services company, and that means being everywhere. So, like, are they really going to stick to and commit to making Windows 10 work on mobile?
Yeah, I mean, if they don't have to design two OSs anymore, then the core framework for Windows 10 just writes itself. And I think that's the goal. They get it to a point where it's a responsive and dynamic design, the same way that a web developer would design a single web page that's adaptable across multiple screen sizes. You have to build the infrastructure beforehand, and then build on top of it. And I think if they do a good enough job with Windows 10 as a platform, then yeah, I don't see any reason why Windows 10 shouldn't be completely successful, especially when they're partnering now with Windows developers to create universal apps that'll run on both, so they can use a single code base. I mean, Dropbox was the best example of that.
Well, just because if Windows 10 can work on mobile is a big if, and like just bracket that for a second. But even if they end up getting it to work on mobile in a way that everyone's like, yeah, this is pretty good, is that even compelling enough to get them to being a serious competitor in the space, or like to be the third platform that competes against the top two? You're gonna have to be bringing something new to the table, not just having feature parity, because there's no space, there's no air for a third.
It's too late,
just to be there, right? Now going back to whether or not this responsive design for desktop and mobile, I will believe that when I experience it, because that is super, super, super hard. Not only like technologically, but like even just from a UX perspective, like even responsive web design doesn't work all the time, right? Like it's a new framework that is a lot of promise, and then with still nagging caveats. And mobile's tough, even when you're pure mobile. Like,
yeah, but I mean, you have to realize that even Apple has this problem with iPad, right? You know, creating a single OS that's functional across. Oh, there's on the mute button. Well done. You know, even Apple has the problem with the iPad adjusting to both iPhone and iPad's you know, scaling. They're not taking advantage of the full screen size of the iPad. They could do a lot more in terms of making the iPad a more responsive OS.
So, like, I guess I would put it this. Let's put a positive spin on it. If Microsoft pulls it off, and they have the money and like the expert, like, you know, they have all the resources there to be able to do it. If they do succeed, man, is that an amazing thing. Like, that's something we've never. That's like a new thing. That is Microsoft, like, really pushing forward and innovating. Because you're totally right that even Apple, as close as iOS and OS X are getting, are still not the same or completely functional. That would be amazing. That would make Microsoft like a leader in tech again, in a very, very significant way. Not just a player, but a leader.
Well, I mean, yeah, a leader in the platform product, but then they'd have to convince developers to finally build services that run on the platform, and that's a whole other problem that I don't think Microsoft's ever going to solve, right? They're going to be stuck with this sub 5% market share until they figure out, or they focus on you know, hyper local areas like developing markets where they can buy a Windows Phone for $79, and they're competing with low-end Android and Firefox and Ubuntu phones.
Well,
and you know, that's exactly where the majority of their money is coming from.
Okay, thought experiment. If Windows 10 is awesome, like they nail it, and it does everything that iOS or Android could do. So it's just sitting there. You haven't jumped on the platform yet. How many Microsoft apps and services would you have needed started to use on Android or iOS that you really like, that the next time you buy a phone, you'll be like, oh, maybe I'll go with the Microsoft one, because the integration of the things that I enjoy will just be a little bit better, in the way that people who are tied into Google get the most benefit on Android. Like, how many things like would you need to use in the Microsoft ecosystem?
Well, I mean, they've displayed their willingness to adapt to other platforms, so I don't know. My concern isn't really with the app number, and I want to, you know, make this very clear. It's with the quality of the apps, right? Windows Phone has a ton of apps that I like, and it's, you know, I use a certain number of services like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you know, Slack. The apps for Windows Phone just aren't as good, and they're not updated as quickly on Windows Phone. And until developers get to the point where they're doing Windows Phone at the same time, it's probably not for me, and that's just my reality. But
okay, so assume Windows 10 takes care of that, right? For the most part, and it's just like, oh hey, I started using Microsoft's new mail client because it's really, really good, because they bought one and it's great, and now it's even better on Microsoft. And I use OneNote and OneDrive because they're actually really, really great, and a lot of free storage, and they work really well. And I started using, like, we all probably don't remember or think too much about the progression of lock-in that happened on whatever platform we're on, but there was a progression of, like, I could not live without this application. I could not live without that application. I'm sitting here, and I wonder, like, because this is the actual mountain that Microsoft would have to climb to get people to jump over, where they're like.
I think that's the difference, right? Is that I find that over the last few years, Windows Phone has become less about sign into your Outlook account. Like, you don't. I feel like if Microsoft can make it so that you don't necessarily have to do that, then, and like that's like a company that they bought. Like, one of the best things about it was that you could do like Exchange and Gmail and Google Calendar and all that kind of stuff for Sunrise. So it's like, I don't know, I just find that that's the tie, is that you can't tie you can't expect users to tie themselves to your services if you're already trying to get them to switch. Like, that's two battles.
No, I
Right.
totally agree.
So, I mean, what's most interesting to me is whether Microsoft patches ties with Google in its quest to become a software and services company again. So, we'll see. And it's just the beginning. I think Windows 10 for phones, Windows 10 for small tablets, and Windows 10 for desktop is going to be a great product regardless of where you use it. And this is the first time I'm actually excited for the prospect of using Microsoft software and services.
Me too.
So that, and I think a lot of people are saying that. So good on you, Microsoft, for getting there.
Good job on you, Microsoft. Good job on you.
And you're challenging the status quo, which is Google dominating the cloud service, the software and services, and Apple Apple in the hardware space, right? People don't want to be forced to use terrible Apple services when they're running Apple hardware. So right now, it's really interesting that I'm using an iPhone, which is Apple hardware, and I'm using Gmail, which is Google, services, and I'm using Outlook, which is Microsoft software. And that's to me like it's a mobile utopia. It's great.
Yeah. You don't want to be prompted to download friggin' Silverlight every time you open an app.
Terrible.
Spare me.
So the new Microsoft does look pretty good.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. I don't think we have time to bitch about Lollipop.
No, we'll get to that next week when we have our special guest, Teddy Kritsonis. He is our regular automotive columnist, and he'll be joining us on the pod next Thursday. Stay
Teddy's
tuned.
Takes.
Teddy's Takes. Teddy's Corner.
We're figuring that out.
Teddy's Toy Box.
He's going to have a monthly automotive column where he just beats up all the automakers for making terrible infotainment centers.
Teddy.
Teddy. Oh, man. Oh, you win. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this quick pod. And we will see you back next week. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.